Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. Technology. That's what we're dealing with today. So we're going old school. We're going to go straight using Zoom. LinkedIn Live won't cooperate. So we appreciate everybody joining.
So brilliant. As everyone knows, we're here to talk about your AI initiative has a people problem, not a technology problem. Anyone who knows me knows that I have banged on for about the last decade about how project management, and I guess now most companies, most departments, not just project management, it's a people issue rather than a process people issue, as in process is now being taken over by AI, but it's still about people fundamentally. And so we're here just to basically talk about our AI initiatives, change management, and the lack of, the lack of change management I see in a lot of transformation programs. We've obviously got myself moderating. We've got Kaleem and Jennifer from Blend Me and James, and we will get on and do some proper introductions. But we initially just wanted to start and talk about the fact that we've obviously gone through 3 massive pivots in the last 6 years, from COVID, remote work, the AI sort of now taking over everyone's life. And it's just this huge change to basically everyone's job, workforce, the way that we work. And change management, I think, is now becoming fundamentally even bigger than it's ever been. So one of the big things about this is one of these stats that we found from the Boston Consulting Group that's basically said that 70% of all transformations fall short of their original goals. And ultimately, it's not the technology, it's the people part that doesn't ultimately work. Most of the time, there is a massive disconnect between what a company wants to do and what the people within it are prepared to do, basically, in an absolute sort of easiest way of describing that. And therefore, we all sort of got together and we can go into detail on this in a little bit, but in terms of gold project management and what we do and Blend Me, and started to think, how do we partner? How do we fix this? Because this is something that comes up all the time. So I also want to just, I guess, a bigger question to the audience, if the questions are actually working. But I guess when everyone else here thinks about change, what's the first thing that comes to mind? In my mind, I mean, I'll say the first thing that comes to my mind is, oh God, not again. It's probably the first thing I would think of. But it'd be great just to have some questions crop up and we'll have a look at them in a bit. And Kaleem, if we go over to the next slide, then we can basically see what I was trying to say. The gap that currently no one budgets for. You have leadership decide to change, something happens, and then change actually happens. And this is actually really good timing on the basis that me and James actually went to a AI transformation community-led event yesterday. And one of the things I found the most interesting was we had these 5 panelists off on stage, and they were all talking about how they added AI transformation. And one of the quotes that I specifically remember is this MD of quite a large organization saying that they had to pull their team kicking and screaming, was the specific language that she used, in order to get them to adopt the AI tools. And she saw that almost as like a fundamental issue of like the project managers, like why it was so difficult to get them to do something that ultimately was going to serve them and benefit them. And I just found that such an interesting thing that not just her, but not a single panelist mentioned the concept of change management. They were talking about what is the biggest revolution in the workforce today in terms of how it affects all of us. And none of them mentioned transformation. Let's do some introductions then. So I'm Michael Gold. I run Gold Project Management. I have run that for 3 years. And one of the main things that we're seeing at the moment is we are doing these big AI transformation pieces. And so we just thought it'd be a really interesting thing to talk about. I'm based in the UK. And I guess I'll pass over to James. Actually, I'm going to take one step back before I pass over to James, because I just realized what the title of this slide was. And I thought I should probably give it some credence or some air and talk about how I actually met Kaleem and how this has all kind of started. And I just found it quite funny on the basis that this was an AI transformation piece that we're doing. AI is slowly taking over the world and all of that. But about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, I put into ChatGPT, I'm going fractional. I'm interested in fractional work. Who should I speak to? And ChatGPT told me to speak to Kaleem. And I just found that was like one of my first biggest uses of AI in a weird world. And it led me to Kaleem and it led us here. Anyway,
it's called GEO. It's called GEO, in case you didn't know. It's a new thing. And thank you, Michael. It was cool. It was cool. I have to say, thank you, Perplexity or ChatGPT. I appreciate that. Yeah. Now we have a bond. And now we're brothers. Thank you, chat.
We are.
I only
daily
found out
life.
about GEO last night at this event, and I had to do that slightly embarrassing thing where, like, I was Googling subtly, and Michael kicked me under the table. He's like, "You should know this." I'm like, "I should know this," but look, that's a perfect example of the rate and pace of change. You know, the fact that technology is driving us all so far forward, and we have to get new language around it and new grammar around it, and working out how we interact with the interconnectivity that this is generating. Sorry, tangent already. I've already derailed this. I apologize. Hi, everyone. I'm James Lee. I'm a delivery lead and a strategic partner. I work with Michael at Goal Project Management with partnership work. But also, I just see down there, it says Kintara AI. I'm the delivery lead there, one of the co-founders. And we're very much a human-centered, human-in-the-loop, human experience AI consultancy that has a remit around ethical behaviors, sustainable behaviors, and generally trying to use technology to make the world a better place. I'm gonna throw it all the way over the Atlantic right now to Kaleem.
I'll let Jennifer go first. Ladies first. Jennifer.
I'll do you one better, James. I was today years old when I learned about GEO. So Kaleem will curse at me later. Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Cameron, CEO of Blend Me Inc. and change management practitioner. My work focuses on helping organizations navigate change in ways that support adoption and strengthen employee engagement by focusing on the people side of change. And thanks for being with us today.
Hey, everyone. My name is Kaleem Clarkson. I'm the COO of Blend Me Inc. I'm a remote work expert. We've been talking about remote work for a long time. We started Blend in 2013 as really just a side hustle for remote companies only, working on, the people operations side, fractional HR. And, hey, you got to post your content. That's how you're going to get found. So I just have to say, if any of you are wondering, hey, how do you get found on these AIs? You definitely have to post content. But I'm passionate about work-life integration, and I talk a lot about social connections. Believe it or not, remote work, it's great, but you have to be very intentional. That's like always the magic word that we talk about. And I firmly believe in person for the right reasons. So thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, everyone. And I guess a little bit about how we're going to run this session. So Kaleem will be starting us off, but then we'll pass over to Jennifer and James. There's intertwining sections, but they kind of have their own sections. We have a bit of a Q&A across things, but ultimately, even if it's on a Q&A slide or not on the Q&A slide, the more interaction I think there is from everyone, the better. And I can already see just in the chats, Andrew sort of talking about when we asked about change, basically said change equals resistance. And when I pressed him on that in terms of, does it have to be that? He said, it's a common reaction. And not again, like I said, and it's a side effect of that. I think
Michael, don't ruin our stuff right now, Michael. Slow down, baby. Let's go.
I'm just saying, this is what Andrew has already said, and I'm feeding that in, and that we are going to talk about some of that stuff more.
Andrew, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, because Jennifer's definitely going to talk about resistors. It's resistance. It's a common thing. But one of the things that we're hearing right now is about fear. And a lot of the things that are happening right now with organizations is that, especially with individuals, is that change with no voice grows fear. And what that means is, do you have a voice in this change as an individual? Individuals need time to digest the change, to hear their change, and really maybe have some input about, like, how could we make this better? Here's how I'm feeling, here are all these other things. When you have change and you're not allowed to kind of have that voice, it grows more fear. And then fear without a plan. If you don't have a plan, it really creates distrust, right? So why are people afraid today? They definitely have a reason to be afraid. It's not a feeling of something that, just forget about it. Everybody's hearing the news, right? And in the news, how many people have heard about a few layoffs recently? Okay. So you're seeing right here from Gallup, and this stat is actually a couple of years old because, they got to do the research. But at the time, 22% of US workers felt like, I'm afraid of losing my job. Like I'm fearful of this, right? And then that's followed up with all the CEOs saying, yeah, we're going to reduce our workforce because, we expect to implement AI. So they do have a right to be fearful. And what Jennifer is going to talk about later, we got to throw that in there. She's going to talk a little bit about individual change and what it takes to kind of move through those changes. But it's not all doom and gloom. You can do change successfully. And if you use a framework, it's 7 times more likely to be successful. So Michael earlier was talking, showing the stats, 70% of all change management initiatives fail, common statistic, but you can overcome that with a really great change management framework. So we talked about the different things of change or the different things of fear. That thing earlier was about fear, right? Like, oh, Dell's cutting all these people, Meta just cut off some people. I'm sure there's some cuts probably this week that made news, I'm sure, or even last week, Intuit, the week before that. So that's the news that's kind of driving some of that fear, and people have that right. Well, now let's talk about trust. So how are trust, related to how successful initiatives are, is that when you look over the last 6 years, we're going to go back to the pandemic, we've seen 3 gigantic seismic changes of how we actually work. And how we were working before that was pretty consistent, probably over 100 years. I think the office was created, someone Google that, I think it was like 1900 was the first office in like probably the UK, I think, with ships or something. So someone Google that and figure out the real date so I can remember that. But anyway, you can see these huge seismic shifts. In 2020, the tone was, oh no, everyone's sick or can potentially be sick. So what the organizations were saying was like, we want you to be safe, work from home. So that's one message, but you had to change significantly overnight. And as you can see the statistics right there, prior to the pandemic, only 7% of work was done at home, at working remotely. That's prior to the pandemic. At the peak of the pandemic, 60% of the work days were done remotely. That's a quick shift. It's about 100 years of change in just, 2 weeks? We went from being in the office every day to everyone being home. So then that was a big change. That was a big shift, and that was a forced shift. But the message was, we care about your health. We care about you as a human. Fast forward to 2023, 26, you start seeing the message, oh, come back now. So now we've had one huge change. Now we have another big change of, oh, well, come back. We got to get back to the real work, or we got to get back to the way things were done correctly. Although time has shown we were actually pretty successful during those years. But as you can see, look at the change there. During the pandemic, only 5% of organizations felt like they were that they were in the office full time, only 5%. Fast forward till today, we're up to 54%. So now another change, right? We care about you, now come back. Like, just think about how drastic that change was. People moved away, people organized their healthcare and stuff. So that was a really big change. Now, what we're saying, what you're hearing is, oh, we have this new AI thing. Don't worry, just trust us, right? Like, we want you to do this job. We want you to use AI, but don't worry about it. And you can see there, 75% of the people feel like the CEO's role is to really build that trust divide all the time. And that divide of trust, that's the CEO's role. But then you see that 44%, only 44% feel like they're actually doing that. So leadership really, really matters. So with these huge shifts, you can see how there's a lack of trust between the organizations and between their employees of how these big seismic changes has happened over time. So you can just really see that there's a lot of change. So what I have found recently is that they actually gave this idea of fear around AI a name. Now, it's just a proposed diagnosis. It's a proposed clinical framework, that's been submitted to the DSM. So this is a proposed submission. I can't wait to talk to these 2 faculty from the University of Florida. I've actually reached out to them. I'm going to be talking to them very soon. But they came up with this framework of what people are feeling about AI, and it's called AIRD, Artificial Intelligence Replacement Dysfunction. And it's kind of fascinating. So just kind of take a quick look at these because, technology today kind of delayed the thing a little bit. It's pretty funny. Somebody commented, so it is a tech problem. Whoever commented that on the LinkedIn thing that's pretty funny. That's pretty hilarious. Yeah, we had a tech issue. But as you can see here, one of the things that I feel I'd love for you guys to put in the Q&A, which one of these that you all have kind of felt the most, but like the fear of becoming obsolete, that's a big one. That's a big fear. Like, oh, am I even going to be around? That was something that I kind of have dealt with. I'm a former front-end engineer, and I see all my fellow Drupal people, front-end developers, shout out to them. But everybody is a little nervous about, geez, what are we looking at? I think loss of occupational identity is a big one for people. Like, I am a front-end developer, I am a manager, I am a X, Y, and Z. And we've all kind of attached ourselves to those identities, especially on LinkedIn, right? What's going to happen when that's gone? So just looking at these, it's an actual real framework that like these are real feelings that people are having. So let your people have those feelings. It's actually okay. And last but not least, this is the decision that a lot of people are dealing with right now as far as leadership. And there's two ways that you can go about it, right? Like you can either, and I think this is the struggle that most executives are dealing with, and you're seeing it play out live here. You have two options. You can fire and rehire, which, by the way, I mean, look, if you feel like that's the right thing to do, so be it. But you have to recognize how that impacts your organization, right? It's a really short-term view of things. Kind of look at this as a marathon. Everyone uses that analogy, I know, but it's simple. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, when you do a marathon, I've never ran a marathon, by the way, but if we were to run one, from what I've heard, from what I'm told, is you can't sprint in the beginning and you're not going to finish it. You're just not going to. So fire and rehire is kind of that sprint. It's short term, but your culture can take a hit. And just think about that. I've had, colleagues who've worked at big organizations. When people are having layoffs, that survivor's guilt is a real thing. Like when your friend, and I don't like this term as a people ops person, my work wife or my work husband or my work bestie, those things, when people leave, you're impacted by that. So you can fire or rehire, and we're seeing a lot of that right now with a lot of big organizations. They're firing a lot of people, but they're rehiring very quickly. And you can kind of see the people that survive those cuts, they're sitting around looking around a little nervous. So we like the idea of invest and adapt, of course. Like for us, it's about being people first. It's about giving people the opportunity, right? And that's how you can actually build trust. Fire and rehire, I don't know how much that's going to help you with trust. So, the people that are there, they've witnessed going through these different size, workplace changes on how we work over the past 6 years, go home, come back, do this, do that. So then the trust is eroding there. And now they're seeing their colleagues being fired, and then you're rehiring. So that trust kind of erodes. On the flip side, invest and adapt. You're investing in your people. It signals that, hey, you are worth it. We want to invest in you. And it builds loyalty. And really for us and Michael and James, and the reason why we kind of joined forces is even as a change management and AI consultancy, our values align. They believe in the people is what really makes the change. So again, which one of these characteristics do you all kind of see? If you could kind of drop that in the chat, that would be great. But yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaleem. And I guess a couple of things, I'll let people kind of read that question and start to drop things in. I can see one or two, which I will get to. You've just gone over what is a relatively serious topic, but I'm still going to bring us back to one of the things you said earlier, Kaleem, because I found it quite interesting when I quickly Googled it on the site, and a massive difference between the US and the UK. You kind of were like, when was the first office? Thinking it might be 100 years ago. And I think that's really indicative of America and your history compared to the UK's history. Because when I actually looked it up, it was 1726 is when we made an office in London. But in terms of when the US kind of got involved in terms of what that meant, the first entry I can see here is 1906 is where the first open plan layout was done, which was the US. And I just found that quite interesting in the sense of the UK has a lot of history. And I don't think sometimes Americans know that in a sense of we're really old. We have a lot going on.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
Yeah, all right. I just wanted to really look at that. But we had Brett's already put in the chat that his biggest fear is that the persistent fear of his writing or editing skills becoming obsolete is one of them. And I guess whilst other people kind of start to add further things into the chat, I'm just going to randomly ask James, what's your biggest fear from this characteristic?
I think it's the first one. It's the fear of obsolescence. That idea that if one is not able to be adaptable and malleable to the changing needs of the market, that you can very easily find yourself, if not totally obsolescent, that you lose a core part of what the value you brought to an organization or to a deliverable is. I'm not sure how grounded in reality that fear is, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't still, occupy quite a lot of brain space for me. What about you, Kaleem? Which one of these resonates with you?
For me, it was loss of occupational identity.
That was my second one. Yeah,
you put a lot of effort into it. And Brett, shout out to Brett. By the way, Brett, we just know her. We love her. We worked with her. She's an awesome copywriter. As a copywriter, yeah, I could definitely, she's worked for a long time as a copywriter in the field. And what I know is working with words is not easy. And there's certain people that have these high level skills, and the fact that so many people are using AI to write copy, I'm right there with you. It's like, what about all of this time of building skills, and then like what good will they be moving forward? So that's a big one for me. Jennifer, how about you?
I have to concur. I am obsessed with efficiency. That is a good and a bad thing about me. But in the case of AI, I think fear of obsolescence is like everyone else, unfortunately.
That's really interesting. Again, tying back to the transformation program that we went to yesterday, the AI conference, where I would say most people in the audience, it was fear of being obsolete, and most people on stage, it was obsession with efficiency. Because I said leadership versus everyone else kind of viewpoint.
Yeah, that's a big one.
But we had our quick personal story. Our water heater broke yesterday, and we got to chatting with the plumber who showed up, and he went to school for finance and was like, nope, this is not the way of the future, and became a plumber, and he's like super thriving. And we thought, well, that is probably a smart move,
Smart change on his part.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still, this is derailing a little bit. I'm still really positive about the future. I just think we haven't quite hit that precipice of like where the changes come from. I'm genuinely a big believer of the idea that there will be new jobs created in different ways. The way that we restructure, I think, will be different. I think there will be a balancing act of when people realize AI takes you to a certain point. It doesn't actually take you as far as you think, and things will I think we'll eventually start to find some common ground again. I think it's all just a bit of a cowboy, kind of area at the moment, but I do think it will find a new way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who will end up doing exactly what they want to do. And I actually can see the lack of occupational identity becoming a bigger and bigger one, because who you thought you might be might not be who you are, which is kind of to that plumber point. It's not that everyone will become unemployed. It's just you might end up in a career that you didn't expect, and the one that you dreamt of forever, unfortunately, one way or another might be changing. But anyway, Jennifer, do you want to take us back to this and continue?
And a good segue, because I think that resistance is less about the technology and more about what it represents for people. And there's so many unknowns right now about all of that. All right. So in addition to AI replacement dysfunction, I want to talk quickly about what else contributes to why we feel the way we feel when things change, how change management helps people adapt, and then sort of a call to action of what leaders can be doing now. And, Michael, you said in the beginning, not this again, right? A lot of people, I think, align with that. And it's something that in our space we know and hear a lot about, which is called change fatigue. And Kaleem spoke of those three major shifts that we've all experienced, moving to remote and back to the office. And now we have to think about AI implementation and what does that mean for us? And so basically our brains are on overload all the time. And we rarely experience change one initiative at a time, because professional, organizational, personal changes all often overlap and compete for our time and attention. So, even positive change takes our energy, right? So constantly having to adapt creates this sort of uncertainty. It reduces our focus on things that need to be focused on. It lowers our capacity to absorb more change. And because of that, resistance is not always resistance to the idea itself. It's often exhaustion from the pace and the volume of change that we're constantly dealing with. And that's especially relevant with AI, because many employees already are feeling that change saturation before AI came along. And so that's kind of where trust comes in. Trust really matters in these instances. It's built through early communication, transparency, providing people with the tools and support from leaders that they need to succeed through changes. And when employees feel informed and supported, they're more likely to engage with the changes rather than becoming overwhelmed by it. But unmanaged change can create fatigue over time, and fatigue will definitely erode trust. So that brings us to how organizations help people through changes intentionally. And, from Kaleem's aired concepts, something change practitioners have known for a long time, and that is change is emotional before it is operational. We are humans. We operate emotionally before anything. And so whether that's, AI coming along, some other initiative, people first experience change emotionally. So feelings of uncertainty, excitement, fear before they ever feel like they can engage with it. So what is change management? It's not simply communication or training. At its core, it is the structured process of helping people successfully move from the current state to the future state. And organizations often focus on technology, systems, the implementation go live. That's a heavy focus. But adoption of change is the human side of transformation. And there's a common saying that organizations don't change, people do. And that's because business change only happens when individuals adopt the new behaviors. And so models like ProSize ADKAR focus on the individual journey, which builds awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And you can announce a transformation and assume that change has started, but it begins when people move from that awareness into the desire phase and buy into what is actually changing. That's when organizations evolve, when people actually shift their habits and their mindsets and their behaviors. Also in the change space, this has come up in the chat a little bit, resistant to data. It is information, likely telling you something the project plan didn't capture. It can surface risks that we didn't anticipate. So it's not something to dismiss. It's definitely something we should be learning why it's happening. And because people rarely nowadays resist technology itself, they resist uncertainty about what it means for them. So without understanding the why behind a change, why is my organization forcing AI on me? Emotions like fear and uncertainty emerge. And, we're asking things like, will my role change? Will my skills still matter? Am I prepared for this? And so good change management practices create spaces for those kinds of conversations instead of avoiding them. And then with implementation, it is the tactical rollout of a new tool or a new process, while adoption is the extent to which employees actually embrace and integrate that change into their daily routines. I don't know if we have a thumbs up on here because we're in a different setting. I was going to say, but show of thumbs up though. How many of you experienced a project where technology worked, but adoption struggled? Right? I think we've all probably experienced that. And that gap between implementation and adoption is exactly where change management operates. And so successful adoption happens when people have the skills, the buy-in, the confidence to make that change stick. And adoption is actually what's delivering the value. So while this isn't a full picture of change management, it does help explain how we understand and support people through transition. And then finally, I talked about change fatigue and the emotions people are experiencing around AI, fear, uncertainty, anxiousness. Those are all normal responses. But because AI is moving so quickly, people are still trying to understand what it means for their role, their future, their ability to succeed. And that's why the time to support people is now. Change management brings us back to the fundamentals. We're building trust through transparency. We're creating opportunities for dialogue. Let's talk about things. Equipping employees with skills and support that they need to get through it and help people feel prepared and ready. And I think that last one's a really big one, feeling like I'm ready for the change. So the greatest risk is not that AI is going to change the work itself necessarily. The risk is really expecting people to adapt to it without helping them through the transition. And when employees understand what's changing and why it matters, they're feeling better about being engaged with it.
Thanks.
Okay, so Michael,
Thanks, Jennifer.
I did as fast as I could.
I know. We're looking, obviously appreciate everyone that because we started late, it's going on a little bit. So obviously if you do need to drop, then feel free to drop. But we're not, James has got his segment. Hopefully you'll stick around for it. It's a very interesting segment, obviously, and you should. But in terms of this question, obviously this is what typically influences how people respond to change. And I guess another way of phrasing this, maybe for this session, if anyone wants to put in a comment, is what influences you specifically? What would help you in terms of how you would react to change? And actually, Andrew's already kind of a step ahead. And he said it will drop when they're included in the planning. So if they're getting real training and it's used to enhance their jobs, even with some change, and not sold as a way to get rid of them. And I think that's actually ultimately the crux of what this session is meant to be kind of saying, as in without change management, things get misconstrued, things happen to people without them being brought along the journey. And that's when everyone thinks that you're being gotten rid of. If someone says to me, or anyone I know in an organization, hey, we're implementing AI and there's nothing else. There's no like, we're going to bring you on the journey. We're going to explain why we're bringing AI. We're explaining how it will help you in your job or whatever. If they just say, look, we're implementing AI, then everyone's going to think, oh God, how long have I got here?
Totally true. Totally true. I actually spoke to someone the other day and they literally said that their organization, they work for a big company, I won't say the name, but like they said, hey, we want to implement AI. Everybody, you have unlimited tokens, go ahead and implement it. That was it. That was the change management. Like, so everybody, they didn't know what their expectations were. They didn't know where to start. They were just told, go ahead and implement. Can you imagine what the environment was like there? You know, as far as when you talk about fear, like, yeah, just go ahead and implement it. Unlimited tokens, you know, with no plan, no communication, nothing at all. And it hasn't been going very well, put it that way.
Shocker.
And I'll add, one of the reasons why I said the changes now is because, you know, AI is still new. It's coming fast, but it is still a new thing. And so if we can sort of build buy-in by giving that sense of ownership to people, like, you know, we talk a lot about co-creating changes together, and people tend to respond more positively when they feel included and they've had an opportunity to provide input. So being part of the process sort of builds that automatic buy-in. And, you know, once people are bought in, they tend to adopt it and, you know, it makes the change stick. So I think giving that sense of ownership is going to be important early on for a lot of organizations.
I think ownership's key to any kind of project management, kind of big transformation. Ownership, because otherwise, as James is about to allude to, and I will hand over, Kaleem, so feel free to go to the next one, but as James is about to allude to in terms of delivery is one part of the thing. I mean, we can all deliver something. It's what happens after. Like, if no one adopts it, what did delivery even happen? Is, you know, did a tree fall in the woods? Did delivery happen? So yeah, James.
Right.
Yeah. So what we've got here is a little bit of a playful thing. You know, we're talking about versus. When we talk about versus in this, we're not trying to create some kind of imagined conflict between change management and project management, because spoiler, it's all part of the same ecosystem. You've got to have both parts of it. They've both got to be complementing one another. That's how true success is delivered. So when we say versus, what we're looking at here is more about creating an acknowledgement that we're all on the same side. But what we're very clear on is that accountability. Okay. So if you don't create accountability in change, and it's just that top-down dictatorial piece, I think is a very 1990s way of looking at change management. I'm thinking about Who Moved My Cheese, right? That's 1990s change management. It's about getting people warmed up to the idea that you're going to lose your job, because that's what change management broadly meant in the 90s. You know, wonderful people like Kaleem and Jennifer, they've changed the narrative around that. And now it intersects with project management. And you'll see here, you know, it's about a virtuous circle. You know, the change management is about diagnosis. It's about preparing people, not softening them up. Big difference. So just doubling down on what Jennifer was saying, you know, if you co-create with people and you have them up top, involved in that decision-making process, able to feel that they are involved, included, listened to, truly listened to, not just, you know, like lip service, they've got to be really heard, then you can own that human outcome through the change management. You then loop in the project management. Now, all of that there is very philosophical. It's very powerful. So then create a plan, a timeline, and you own the outcome as project management. Look at that. You've got a perfect loop of the two parts. It's not a bat and pass. It's perpetual. Okay. So as the project management piece starts to take shape, it becomes tangible. It becomes that moment that has those timeline pieces. Guess what? You're going back to your change management. How do the people feel about this? They co-created the plan. The plan's being implemented. Are they still being listened to? Absolutely essential that it's not just a human in the loop. It's human-centered. Okay, it's got to be that versus may as well be a little person that all of this is pivoting around. I think that's why we love working with BlendMe so much, because we've got such shared values around, you know, making sure at no point do we forget this is about people, right? And I guess that then flows back to the anxiety piece. If you don't acknowledge the person, then they could easily feel obsolete. They could easily feel like their role doesn't exist. Because you've got to remember, you know, people, you know, that's the core of every good business, right? So, project manager versus delivery manager. I'm old enough to remember when no one talked about delivery managers. It was all project managers. Agency world, project managers of all flavors. You junior project managers, senior project managers, but it was project managers. And very simply put, they manage the scope, they manage the budget, they report on the status, and they own the plan. Now, there's nothing wrong with being project manager. I was one for a long time. Michael was one for a long time as well. And they deliver a lot of value. In this modern world where we're looking at meaningful change implementation, AI being a core part of that, it's accelerated the move that I think was already kind of happening anyway over to delivery managers. Okay. So in my mind, the delivery manager has a much more holistic view. They are there to overcome obstacles, they're there to see opportunities, and they're there to own the broader delivery moment. So they're a little bit client servicing, they're a little bit BA. Now, that does not mean they're diluting their skills. What it means is they are working with the technology we now have, the landscape that technology has created, and gone, okay, is it a good use of my time to be manually moving a ticket from column A to column B? Or can I use some technology to free that time up so I can go and find new partnership with a change management company, or I can go and maybe get coffee with my clients? And that's what Kaleem was saying at the top of this call. When it matters in person, I'm a big fan of remote work. You can tell I'm phoning in from my house. But when the moment's right and you do it in person, it's special. So let's create the time and the space through technology and change management to make that possible. Okay, so here's how this all intersects. Delivery and people, we're running together. You'll see here, we've got the little intersections here. Okay, so diagnosis. We are looking over at goal project management and Blend Me. Okay, these are diagnosis experts. I'm going to embarrass you guys. You're diagnosis experts. You know what's going on. You know how to get your arms around it. And you've got that perspective on the people, but simultaneously not sequentially happening. But you also understand that this doesn't exist in a vacuum. Okay, this then needs to be able to be delivered. Okay, so now we've got change readiness. This is that moment that was on Jennifer's slides. It's about consultative, collaborative, co-creation around this change readiness. We're mapping out the resistance. Who's our early adopters? Who are our flag carriers, our torch bearers? Who are going to be the people inside that organization that we can help us do that journey with? Okay, so now the ground is set. Everyone's ready. The board is ready to be played. Gold, we come back in. We've got our delivery planning. It's where we pull on all of our expertise around what it is to do meaningful delivery. It's not just transactional ticket moving. It's about moving the needle for the organization, for the clients, for the individuals within it, all framed within a change management process. Putting my Kantara hat on, this is the bit I get really excited about as well. Because when we talk about intentional AI, our CEO, Ed, talks about intentional AI an awful lot, and I absolutely love it. It's about having that moment to say, what is the right technology implementation for this delivery planning piece? How does that get set up? Again, we're not dictating to people. We're saying to you, this is what we're proposing. This is why it is good for you, for an organization. It's going to be what we all need, what we all want. And you'll find resistance. Sure, you can be as persuasive as you like, but that's part of the game, right? And then it gets to number 4. So we all come back together and we implement. And it's the left hand know what the right hand's doing. Everybody's on the same page. Constant iterative review, and you execute with accountability.
There we go, James. There we go, baby.
There we go.
The plan works all together. We're all working together. And I think togetherness is how we're going to move forward, right? Everybody,
Absolutely.
The more you talk, the more you listen to people. I mean, it's pretty basic. Like, the concept of this is pretty easy. Just listen to your people, listen to the feedback. Let's do this together. But in practice, very few organizations want to take that time to do that. So any questions, any thoughts that anybody else have? Would love to chat real quick. I know we have a couple more minutes. I know we're running over, so I appreciate everybody sticking with us.
I was going to say, in terms of everyone answering questions or whatever, if they add stuff into the chat, but James, just, thanks for that, obviously. And I guess I'll ask you a question just in case no one else is writing anything. But in terms of anyone who is watching this, if they were about to kick off like a big AI transformation piece, like next month, what's the one thing that either they should do differently Or, well, I guess what's the one thing they should do? And how does that differ from maybe what you've seen?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think the simple answer there is take the same phased, pragmatic, and intentional approach you would to any big implementation. Don't try and do it all at once. Marathon, not sprint, don't boil the ocean, whichever sort of analogy works best for you. Start small, make achievable moments, but acknowledge the AI moment more than you would if it were a non-AI piece. Okay. So we're saying, look, this is going to be chunked out in the same way, starting small, great trees grow from tiny acorns, all of that stuff. We use a lot of analogies today and doing that a bit. But at each point, be critical in a positive way about the AI moment within each of those phases, because it's new, because it creates this potential discomfort, because it's got this potential DSM classification. Let's be respectful of that, because if we're not respectful of that, are we really looking after our people? So that'd be what I'd suggest people do slightly differently.
It's a really interesting thing, but as a project manager, like the number one thing I bang on about in every project that I kick off is success criteria. It's like, what does success look like at the end of this?
Yeah.
And for some reason, AI has stopped people from critically thinking. And so going back to like Kaleem's example with that, here's a bunch of tokens. What was the output? What was the expected result? You said, Kaleem, it's not working, but what was the intention? I just find it such a strange thing that because people have AI, not just change management, but any kind of concept of success criteria seemingly just goes out of the window. But I am really conscious of time. And so I imagine, Kaleem, maybe it's just time to get to that last slide, do a quick wrap up. And ultimately, the cost of doing nothing is zero. We're not here to sell anything. We just wanted to have a conversation really about what's going on in the world, how change interacts with delivery, and honestly just open up a conversation, because at the moment there's just so much going on. I just thought it was a really nice way to network, speak to different people, meet different people, and have a little bit of a chat, and also just sort of get to work with Jennifer and Kaleem a little bit together. And yeah, I think it's been really fun. Other than the fact that we had loads of technical difficulties, none of us know how to use LinkedIn.
Come on, LinkedIn. You're better than this. And by the way, we are going to do this again. It's going to be a series. So yeah, this is, there's a lot to unpack in here. We didn't even James and Michael, they have a whole framework that we can go through and talk through. We have a framework that we could talk about. So this is our first one. So appreciate you all for coming, and you're gonna see some more of these coming up in the future for sure.
Thanks for sticking with us, everyone. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you.
And feel free to reach out to any of us.
Cool. Speak soon. Thank you.
All
Bye.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.